Don't forget to like and subscribe to help our channel. The Witch of the Black Mist. The village of Eldoria had always known fear. By day, it was a peaceful town, cobblestone streets, wooden cottages with ivy creeping up their sides, the scent of fresh bread drifting through the cool morning air. But when the sun began to sink behind the mountains, the fear set in, because when night fell, the black mist came. It did not roll in like an ordinary fog. It did not sweep through the streets with the wind. It crawled, thick, oozing, slithering into the cracks of doorways, pooling in the corners of windows, coiling around the village like a living, breathing thing. It consumed everything in its path. Even the stars above disappeared when the mist arrived. And then came the whispers. Elias, Jonathan, Isabella. Every night the mist called names. The villagers did not know how it chose, but they knew what it meant. If your name was spoken, you had until sunrise to leave the village forever. If you stayed, by morning you would be gone. No body, no trace, only a charred footprint, burned deep into the village square. They all knew the legend. It was said that centuries ago, before Eldoria was even a village, a woman named Morgana lived there. A healer, a woman of knowledge, someone who understood the earth better than any priest or scholar. She could cure illnesses with strange herbs, whisper to the wind, and predict misfortune before it struck. And for this they hated her. The whispers of superstition grew. They called her a witch, accused her of bringing disease, of stealing children in the night. The men of the village dragged her to the stake, bound her wrists with iron, and set the woodpile beneath her alight. But she did not scream. As the flames climbed her legs, she laughed. "Burn me if you wish," she had whispered, "but you will never escape me." Then, before their very eyes, her body dissolved into black smoke, twisting into the sky, vanishing into the night. The mist arrived the very next evening, and it never left. The boy who did not fear. Elias never believed the stories. He was young, arrogant, and foolish, too proud to be afraid of ghost tales. While others bolted their doors at sundown, whispering prayers and clutching charms of protection, Elias laughed. "A curse? A witch? You're all scared of shadows." So when the whispers came that night, when they slithered through the cracks of his house, curling into his ears like breath against his skin, he ignored them. Elias. The air thickened. The room around him felt wrong, stretched, unnatural. The candle on his bedside table flickered and died, even though there was no wind. Outside, the mist was waiting. It pooled in the street like spilled ink, moving with purpose, dragging itself forward, climbing the walls of the village. You should have been afraid. You should have run. Instead, Elias stepped outside. The village was silent. No crickets, no rustling leaves, no voices, just the mist. It wrapped around his legs, cold as death, thick as oil. The air grew heavy, pressing against his chest, making every breath a struggle. He took a step forward, but the cobbled street beneath him felt wrong, soft, giving like flesh. Then came the footsteps. Not his own. Something was moving in the mist. A shape formed in the darkness. Twisted. Long-limbed. Wrong. Its fingers dragged against the ground, its face hidden in shadow, its head tilting, snapping too far to one side as if its neck had been broken. Elias's heart hammered. He turned to run. The mist grabbed him. Tendrils of darkness coiled around his wrists, his ankles, his throat, tightening like a noose. A cold, whispering voice slid into his ear, not from one direction, but from everywhere at once. You should have listened. And then, the pain began. It was not fire, not ice, but something worse. A burning that spread from the inside out, twisting through his veins, crawling beneath his skin. He gasped, but the mist was inside his mouth, his lungs, his thoughts. His vision blurred. His body felt like it was dissolving. And then, he saw her. Morgana. Her face was pale, her eyes burning with something ancient, something hungry. Her mouth stretched into a smile, too wide, too sharp. "You are mine now." The last thing he heard was his own scream, swallowed by the mist. By morning, Elias's house remained untouched. His door was still locked from the inside. His bed unrumpled, his candle unlit. It was as if he had never been there at all. But in the village square, A single blackened footprint lay burned into the stone. The mist had claimed another soul, and it would return for more. The mist will never leave. The people of Eldoria do not speak of Elias anymore. But when the mist comes at night, when the whispers slither through the streets, they do what they have always done. They shut their doors. They bolt their windows. They wait in silence. And when a name is whispered, they do not look outside, because they know that if they do, the mist will see them, and it will never let them go. The witch's secret garden. There are places in this world that do not belong to us. Places where the trees grow in twisted shapes, where the wind never moves, and where the air is thick with whispers, words spoken in no human tongue. Deep in the Blackwood forest, past the places where even animals refuse to tread, there was such a place. A garden. A place of impossible beauty, hidden beneath the roots of an ancient, dying willow tree, its branches curled like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. No one knew how old the garden was. Some said it had been there before the first village was built, before men ever walked this land. Others whispered that it had appeared overnight, blooming from the bones of those who had vanished in the forest. The air here was wrong. It shimmered with something unseen, something ancient, something hungry. And the flowers glowed. Not in a way that was beautiful, but in a way that was unnatural. Their petals pulsed like beating hearts, their colors too rich, too deep, sickly blues, pulsating reds, twisting tendrils of violet that slithered against the ground. And in the center of the garden stood Celine. No one knew if she was human. Once perhaps, but not anymore. Her silver hair flowed like liquid metal, her skin was too perfect, flawless, smooth, untouched by time. And her eyes were not human eyes. People came to her garden for power. A blue rose for wisdom, a crimson lily for strength, a black orchid for eternal life. They came seeking blessings, miracles. They left as something else entirely. A poet once plucked a blue rose and gained the ability to see the future. But within days, his eyes melted from his skull, his screams swallowed by the earth. A warrior took a crimson lily, his strength becoming godlike. But his flesh began to rot, his veins turning black, his heartbeat slowing, never stopping. The garden always gave, but it always took more. The girl who ran. One night, a girl named Lilia arrived. She was not seeking power. She was running. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, her clothes were torn, her arms streaked with blood. She had fled into the forest blindly, her legs aching, her heartbeat thunderous in her ears. Something was following her. Something not human. It had stalked her for days. Watching. Waiting. She never saw its face. Only its eyes, two burning golden orbs that glowed in the darkness. Its movements were soundless. Its shadow stretched too far across the ground. She did not know what it wanted. She only knew it was getting closer. Lilia stumbled into the clearing, falling to her knees among the glowing flowers. The air here was thick, heavy with perfume, sweet but sickly like fruit left to rot in the sun. A chill ran through her spine. Something about this place was wrong. Then she felt it. A presence. Watching. Slowly she lifted her gaze. Celine stood before her. She had not been there a moment ago. Her silver hair drifted as if underwater, her eyes gleaming like the moon. She tilted her head, her lips curving into a small, knowing smile. "You are different." Her voice was soft, low, but it slithered into Lilia's mind like a whisper woven from silk and shadows. Lilia trembled. Please," she gasped. "Help me." Celine studied her. "You do not seek a gift." Lilia shook her head. "Something follows you." The wind shifted. A shadow spilled across the ground behind her. Slowly Lilia turned. At the edge of the garden, standing just beyond the flowers, was the thing. For the first time she saw it clearly. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs too long, its fingers ending in black, needle-like claws. Its skin was the color of bruises and rot, its chest caved inward as if its ribs had been crushed long ago. But its face was not a face at all. Just a hole, a gaping, endless void where a mouth should be. It stepped forward. The flowers beneath its feet withered. The ground split open. Lilia's body locked in terror. Celine only smiled. "Ah," she whispered. "I see." She lifted a single hand. The vines in the garden shuddered. Then they moved. They shot forward, wrapping around Lilia's wrists, her ankles, her throat. She gasped, struggling, but the vines were stronger than steel, dragging her down, down, down into the earth. Her scream barely left her lips before the ground swallowed her whole. The thing with the hollow face watched. Then it took a step forward. Celine raised a hand. The entire garden came alive. Vines lashed out. Roots shot from the ground, wrapping around the creature's limbs, pulling, tearing, dragging it toward the earth. It thrashed, its movements jerky, unnatural. And then, the soil opened. A black mouth in the earth, wide, waiting. The creature was pulled inside. It did not make a sound. The ground sealed shut, leaving no trace of what had happened. Only silence. Celine turned. In the center of the garden, where Lilia had fallen, a new flower had bloomed. Its petals were black as midnight, its edges tinged with red as if painted in fresh blood. The garden had claimed another soul. Celine smiled. The night was still young, and the garden was always hungry.